This should not exist, but it does. Beneath thousands of meters of ocean water, in places where sunlight cannot reach and pressure alone can crush steel, there are formations that look intentional. Straight lines, right angles, patterns that repeat. Structures that resemble roads, walls, even entire layouts of something that feels planned. And yet, according to everything we know about human history, no civilization should have existed in those places at the time. They would have been above water. It creates a contradiction that is difficult to ignore. Either these structures are not what they seem, or our understanding of the past is incomplete. For a moment, imagine standing at the edge of a vast city. Not modern, not familiar, but undeniably structured. Paths connecting. Larger formations. Elevated sections that resemble platforms. Spaces that feel designed, not random. Now imagine that entire city slowly disappearing beneath rising water, not in a single catastrophic moment, but over years, maybe generations. People leaving, structures collapsing, the memory of it all slowly turning into something that sounds less like history, and more like myth. That is the space where Atlantis exists, not fully real, not fully fiction, but suspended somewhere in between. The earliest detailed account comes from who described Atlantis as a powerful and advanced civilization that existed thousands of years before his time. According to him, it was a society with remarkable engineering, organized systems, and immense influence until it disappeared in a single day and night of destruction, swallowed by the sea. For many, this was simply a philosophical story, a metaphor about power and downfall. And for a long time, that explanation seemed sufficient. After all, ancient texts are often symbolic, shaped more by meaning than by literal truth. But the problem begins when parts of the story start to align, even slightly, with physical evidence. Underwater exploration in the modern era has revealed structures that are difficult to classify. Off the coast of Japan, near, divers discovered massive stone formations with sharp edges and flat surfaces that resemble steps and terraces. Some researchers argue that these are natural formations shaped by geological processes. And that is entirely possible. Nature, over long periods of time, can produce surprisingly regular patterns. But others point out details that feel harder to explain: symmetry, alignment, proportions that seem unusually consistent. This is where the first layer of explanation begins to weaken. Because if these formations are entirely natural, they represent geological behavior that is still not fully understood. And if they are not natural, then they suggest human or human-like activity in a time and place where no such activity should exist. As investigations continued, attention shifted to other parts of the world. In the Atlantic Ocean, sonar mapping revealed large-scale anomalies on the ocean floor, areas where the terrain appears structured rather than random. Some of these patterns resemble grid-like layouts, while others suggest elevated sections surrounded by lower regions, almost like the remnants of walls or boundaries. None of this is conclusive on its own. But taken together, it creates a pattern of its own. A pattern of questions. The mystery deepens when we consider sea levels. At the end of the last ice age, approximately 12,000 years ago, global sea levels were significantly lower than they are today. Vast areas of land that are now underwater were once exposed, potentially habitable, and possibly inhabited. This is not speculation, it is well supported by geological data. Entire coastlines have shifted. Regions that were once dry land are now buried beneath the ocean. So the question changes. It is no longer just, did Atlantis exist? It becomes, could advanced human settlements have existed in areas that are now underwater, and left behind traces we are only beginning to notice? At this point, the mystery takes on a different shape. Because if such settlements existed, they would not necessarily match our expectations of advancement is relative. A Civilization does not need modern technology to create complex structures, organized systems, or lasting impact. What matters is coordination, knowledge, and time. And under the right conditions, those elements can produce outcomes that, when viewed from a distance of thousands of years, appear almost impossible. This leads to competing theories. One suggests that Atlantis was never a real place, but a constructed narrative. An idea used to communicate philosophical concepts about human nature. Another proposes that Atlantis was inspired by real events, perhaps the destruction of a known civilization, such as the eruption that devastated parts of the region, which could have influenced stories passed down through generations. A third theory moves further, suggesting that Atlantis represents a lost chapter of human history, a civilization that existed during a time when sea levels were lower, later submerged and largely erased. Each of these theories holds some truth. And yet, none of them fully resolves the mystery. The breakthrough moment does not come from a single discovery, but from a shift in how researchers approach the question. Instead of looking for a single city, scientists began analyzing patterns, coastlines, submerged structures, sediment layers, and even genetic data from ancient human populations. What they found was not Atlantis itself, but something equally important, evidence that human migration, settlement, and development were far more complex than previously believed. Studies from marine archaeology and geology have shown that early human populations were capable of adapting to changing environments in sophisticated ways. They built near coastlines, relied on marine resources, and likely developed systems we do not fully understand. When sea levels rose, these communities would have been among the first to be displaced and the least likely to leave behind easily accessible evidence. And here is where the twist begins to form. Because the absence of evidence does not necessarily mean the absence of existence. It may simply reflect the difficulty of access. Most of our archaeological understanding comes from land-based discoveries. But the ocean covers the majority of the planet. If significant parts of human history are now underwater, then we are working with an incomplete record. By default. The deeper twist is not that Atlantis has been found, but that we may have been asking the wrong question all along. Instead of searching for a single, lost city, we might need to consider the possibility of multiple submerged settlements, fragments of history scattered across the ocean floor, each representing a piece of a much larger picture. Atlantis, in that sense, may not be one place. It may be a memory, a simplified version of a complex reality, preserved in story because the physical evidence became inaccessible. Imagine trying to reconstruct an entire civilization from a handful of scattered clues, most of which are hidden beneath kilometers of water. Imagine knowing that the majority of the evidence exists, but remains out of reach, not because it is gone, but because it is buried in one of the least explored environments on Earth. I tried to follow this idea further, looking at maps of ancient coastlines, comparing them with modern underwater scans. The more the data overlaps, the more a quiet realization begins to form. There are gaps in our knowledge that are not small. They are vast. Entire regions, entire timelines, where our understanding becomes uncertain. Not because nothing happened there, but because we have not yet found a way to see it clearly. And that may be the most important part of this story. Because Atlantis is not just about a city. It is about how we define history itself. We tend to think of the past as something fixed, something already discovered and categorized. But in reality, it is more like a map with missing sections, areas labeled not with answers, but with questions. So, was Atlantis real? The answer may depend on what we mean by real. If we are looking for a single, perfectly preserved city exactly as described, then perhaps not. But if we are asking whether advanced human societies could have existed in regions now lost to the sea, whether those societies could have left behind traces that we are only beginning to detect, then the answer becomes far less certain. And that uncertainty is not a weakness. It is an invitation. An invitation to look deeper, to question assumptions, to accept that the boundary between myth and history is not always clear. Because sometimes, what we call myth is not a fabrication, but a memory. A memory shaped by time, simplified by storytelling, and preserved just enough to remind us that there are still parts of our past waiting to be understood. If you found this story thought-provoking, take a moment to like the video so more people can explore these hidden mysteries. Subscribe for more deep, story-driven documentaries on forgotten history and scientific anomalies. And share this with someone who believes we already know everything about the past, because the deeper we look, the more we realize how much is still hidden beneath the surface. But that is not where the story ends. Because just when it seems like Atlantis can be explained as a combination of rising sea levels and lost coastal settlements, the evidence begins to shift again. Quietly, but significantly. As deep-sea exploration technology improved, researchers started mapping areas of the ocean floor with far greater precision. What they expected to find was randomness, natural formation shaped by currents, pressure, and geological time. And in most places, that is exactly what appeared. But in a few specific regions, the patterns did not behave randomly. They repeated. Lines intersected at angles that seemed deliberate. Structures appeared aligned with each other across distances that felt planned. One of the most debated aspects of these findings is not their existence, but their interpretation. Because the human brain is designed to recognize patterns even where none exist. It is possible that what we are seeing is simply our tendency to impose meaning onto natural shapes. But there is a limit to that explanation. When patterns scale, when they maintain proportion, when they align with environmental features in ways that suggest purpose, the question becomes harder to dismiss. And this is where a more complex idea begins to emerge. Not that Atlantis was a single, isolated civilization, but that it may have been part of a broader network of early human societies that existed along ancient coastlines. These societies would have had access to marine resources, stable climates, and trade routes that followed the edges of continents. Over time, as ice melted and sea levels rose, these regions would have been gradually submerged, erasing physical evidence while leaving behind only fragments, both in the environment and in human memory. But even this idea encounters a problem. Because some of the structures that have been identified do not just suggest habitation, they suggest organization, planning, a level of coordination that implies knowledge being passed down, refined, and applied over time. And that raises a deeper question. If such knowledge existed, where did it come from? And why does so little of it appear in the historical record we rely on today? This leads to another layer of investigation, one that moves beyond physical structures and into human development itself. Genetic studies have shown that ancient human populations were far more interconnected than previously believed. Groups separated by large distances still share traces of common ancestry, suggesting movement, interaction, and exchange of knowledge over long periods. This does not prove the existence of Atlantis. But it does suggest that early humans were capable of more complex systems than we often assume. Then comes the breakthrough that changes the direction of the question once again. A series of marine geological studies began analyzing sediment layers from regions where unusual underwater formations had been detected. These layers act like a timeline, recording environmental changes over thousands of years. What researchers found was evidence of rapid, localized flooding events, areas where the transition from land to sea did not happen slowly, but abruptly. Not everywhere, not globally, but in specific zones. This is important because it introduces the possibility that some regions were not gradually submerged over centuries, but lost much more quickly, within a time frame that could be experienced and remembered by human populations. A city, or a settlement, could have existed, and then, within a short period, disappeared beneath the ocean. This aligns, in a subtle but meaningful way, with the original descriptions of Atlantis. Not as a precise historical record, but as a reflection of something real. An event significant enough to be remembered, retold, and eventually transformed into story. But the twist does not resolve the mystery. It deepens it. Because even if we accept that rapid submergence occurred, and that human settlements may have been lost in those events, we are still left with a gap. The scale described in the story of Atlantis, the level of organization, the sense of advancement, does not fully match what we have found so far. The evidence suggests complexity, but not yet the kind of complexity that would explain everything. And that leads to the deeper twist. What if Atlantis was not a single place, and not even a single time? What if it was a convergence of events, multiple settlements, across different regions, experiencing similar fates as sea levels changed and environments shifted? Over generations, these events could merge in collective memory, forming a single narrative that feels more coherent than the fragmented reality behind it. In that sense, Atlantis would not be a lost city waiting to be found. It would be a pattern, one that repeats across different locations, different timelines, and different cultures. A pattern of rise, adaptation, and sudden loss. Imagine being part of one of those early communities. You build your life near the water. You learn its patterns, rely on its resources, trust its rhythm. And then something changes. Slowly at first, almost unnoticeable. Then faster. Land begins to disappear. Structures weaken. The environment you depended on becomes unstable. At some point, you leave or you don't. Either way, what remains is not the place itself, but the memory of it. And memory does not preserve detail perfectly. It preserves meaning. That is why the story of Atlantis persists. Not because it has been proven, but because it continues to fit into the spaces where our knowledge is incomplete. It adapts to new discoveries, absorbs new interpretations, and remains just out of reach of confirmation. So the question is no longer just, was Atlantis real? It becomes something more precise and more difficult. How much of our past is still hidden, not because it is lost, but because we have not yet learned how to recognize it? Because the ocean is not empty. It is a vast archive, holding layers of history that we have only begun to explore. Every new scan, every new expedition, adds detail, but also raises new questions. And sometimes, those questions lead us back to ideas we once dismissed too quickly. In the end, Atlantis matters not as a destination, but as a direction. It points toward the limits of our understanding, reminding us that history is not a fixed story, but an evolving one. The deeper we look, the more we realize that certainty is often temporary, and that mystery is not a failure of knowledge, but a sign that there is more to discover. If this story made you think differently about history, take a moment to like the video so more people can explore these hidden questions. Subscribe for more deep, story-driven documentaries on forgotten civilizations and scientific mysteries. And share this video with someone who believes the past is already fully understood. Because sometimes, the most important discoveries are the ones still waiting beneath the surface.